Hey everyone. So today I thought I'd really like to talk about the topic, can Bitcoin end war? Now, I know that's a really big topic, and well, for want of a better way to describe things, there's no silver bullet. Um, eh, you know, there's no cure to rid the world of conflict. I mean, that's it's always going to be a part of human society, I think. But I can allude to a few really fundamental facts that are really in favor of how Bitcoin can potentially rid the world of major wars, which I think is definitely worth looking into at the very least. For starters, Bitcoin is a peaceful revolution. So it's neutral, it's nationless, it's borderless, and it's neutral in that no one government, no one people, no one entity controls Bitcoin. So from the very foundation, its neutrality is peaceful in its very nature. Um, it's sound money, and generally, sound money, if we look at history, has resulted in peaceful periods in our history. Um, for example, when the gold standard was being um, being implemented worldwide. If we take the period from around sort of 1850 to the sort of 19 to the sort of to sort of 1914, 1915. Actually, it was 1914 when the First World War began. But that period of, say, 100 years, say from 1814 to 1914, was a relative period of peacefulness. And if you compare that to the 20th century, say from 1914 to 2014, people consider, the bulk of the 20th century to be the century of war. I mean, we had the First World War, the Second World War, we've had Vietnam, all the Gulf Wars. I mean, the list is really endless in terms of wars of the 20th century. It's really terrible. So, 20th century is a century of war as opposed to the previous century, which is a relatively peaceful um, period of time. So the correlation between sound money as opposed to uh, uh, money backed by guns, which is exactly the way Paul Krugman, a very intellectual, Nobel Prize winning economist, nonetheless, has told us that the US dollar is backed by men with guns. Well, how peaceful do you want to get? I mean, just on that premise alone, it's pretty apparent that the fiat system, that the currency of the world today, the US dollar, is about as violent and warmongering as you can get. I mean, he literally says it's backed by men with guns. I mean, where's the peacefulness in that, right? Now, there's other examples in history as well where as soon as the world opted for a fiat standard whereby governments could just print money out of thin air, essentially, rather than having a fixed supply of that money, what you found is that governments chose to create money to pay their soldiers to go to war. And that was a very easy process. Whereas in the past, when they had to rely on a fixed standard of money, which was a gold standard, they eventually reached their limit. And at that limit, they could no longer pay their soldiers. And so they could no longer go to war. Okay? So that's a really simple way of recognizing that when you limit a government's expenditure, you limit their power, you limit their ability to enforce their ideas on other states or on other people, So essentially, governments having the ability to go to war whenever they feel like it without the will of the people. And that's a key point here too. So it's a combination of having endless money to finance the war, but also having endless power because the centralizing of a government gives them that ability to just make that decision without looking to the people for their approval. So they don't need the approval of the people to keep printing money. No one tells the government, hey, mate, you better stop printing money. As in, the government just makes that decision on their own. I mean, the Fed does it every day, right? Hey, here's another $1 trillion. Here's another $1 trillion. There's no recourse in that. And that's because of that centralizing power of governments. Now, this would change dramatically under a Bitcoin standard, because not only would the amount of government expenditure be limited, it's hard capped as to how much Bitcoin they've got. But a more important fact even is that the decentralization of Bitcoin means that you don't have a centralized group of people that control all the wealth. That power in the wealth is decentralized over sovereign individuals throughout the nation states. Okay, it's not fixed in one jurisdiction or one centralizing province. So that decentralization is what enables this peacefulness, because you've got different areas where the power is balanced. Rather than being all in one area, it's balanced all around the place because everyone's got a share of that Bitcoin. So these are the two big factors. Okay, the first big factor is that the funding would be limited. So even if governments had, larger amounts of Bitcoin, which they probably will eventually, that funding would be limited. Secondly, the decentralization of the money would already mean that a lot of the majority of the Bitcoin would be distributed into the hands of sovereign individuals. And that means war would require our explicit consent as to whether, and our willingness as to whether we wanted the war. Okay, so then it is not us who require the government's consent. It is the government who requires our consent whether we go to war or not. That's a massive change. That's a massive paradigm shift into how wars begin in the first place. I mean, we as people haven't been consented about whether we want to go to wars, I don't know, for how long? And yet wars keep happening. So we need to exit this fiat money system. We just simply need to exit. We need to transfer sovereignty away from centralized powers, and we need to transfer power and wealth away from central governments and central banks who have the ability to start the wars. If we transfer it to sovereign individuals everywhere around the world, then we decentralize that power. And Bitcoin does this, Bitcoin does this because it transfers that centralized power away and disperses it around the world. Okay, and by doing that, it really is an incredible moment for the history of peace. We can all upgrade to Bitcoin now. Each and every one of us can upgrade, bang, like that, rid ourselves of this fiat system. The fiat system is backed by men with guns. The Bitcoin system is backed by men and women with nodes and ASIC miners and private keys. There's no violence there. I mean, it's a no-brainer. But anyway, there's no panacea here, because it's not like there weren't wars fought with a gold standard, for example. I think the real battle is still within the human species itself, but Bitcoin at least limits all of that. At least it I've spoken about this in other videos as well. It purifies the individual. And that, plus its limiting effect on the abilities of war, I think proposes an incredible opportunity for the human race to move forward. Again, you fix the money, you fix the world. And Bitcoin fixes this. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you're all well. Speak soon. Cheers.